Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight, the first night back since I experienced the earthquake on Friday. I hope you and your family are doing well, and thank you for trusting the National Weather Service with your weather information again on this night. As always, we encourage you to be available to check your weather information at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can always find information online at weather.gov/Alaska, and if you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to email me, david.snider@noaa.gov. I also like to say hello to some of the friends I met at the BIA Providers Conference last week. If you were in town for that, I probably passed you in the hallway there, and it was good to talk to many of you. I want to give a special shout out to Bernadette Lewis and Ben Flint from Chafornack. I didn't get a chance to say hello on Friday when I'd planned to say so, hello to everybody out there, and my best to Bernadette and Ben, who I got a chance to meet and even got a couple selfies with them. So hello to everybody out there. Let's take a look at your weather headlines and your hazardous weather for the next couple days. Wind advisories posted for the Alaska Range all the way out to Denali as a strong southerly flow is working up out of the Gulf. Gusty winds up to 60 miles per hour are possible in those regions through tonight and into tomorrow. So plan on a blustery drive if you're going up through some of the passes there west of the Toe Cutoff, going through the Broad Pass area. Certainly you're going to run into some of that wind as well, moving out of the Susitna Valley and northward into Fairbanks, coming across from Healy as well. The flats up there, you're going to run into a little bit of a gust for the next 24 hours at least. Looking out west, this is more of a winter situation as you get into the yellow shades here. We're talking about winter weather advisories for southwest. A lot of these are going to be allowed to expire as we move through the rest of the nighttime hours. The main issues then will be from the Yukon Delta northward up through Norton Sound. We're looking at least a little bit of wind, but the main issue is really going to be the wind blowing around and reducing visibility from snow that could be in the region. So plan on difficult travel conditions, maybe not the worst you've seen, but something that could slow you down there or perhaps at least get in your way. As you look at the interior of the Seward Peninsula, the orange color means watch, and we are looking at winter storm watches now as we go into the next 24 hours for areas that could see as much as 6 to 12 inches of snow. Now we know it's snowing already on the Seward Peninsula for areas around Nome, and you're under a winter weather advisory, but another wave of snow is coming your way, and again, that could bring that snow total from both events up to about 6 to 12 inches along that south-facing coastline of the Seward Peninsula. Probably going to see a little less here for the interior sections of the Seward Peninsula, but either way, you're going to get some snow in that region, it looks like, and the watch is telling us that this could be a situation that turns into a warning, so watch for that. For the western end of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, you're already under a winter storm warning. We're expecting gusts there up to 65 miles per hour and about 3 to 4 inches of snow, maybe as much as 6. Because of that, visibility is going to come down, and it is going to be a kind of a long-term event. There could be about 2 to 2.5 days worth of snow and wind, so kind of a longer winter storm warning for you. Plan on unsettled weather to continue there across the Bering Strait even after that. So a lot going on, especially for the west coast tonight. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and you can see the overall circulation here sitting out across the southern Bering Sea, sweeping in very deep southerly winds across the north and eastern Gulf, making that moisture move into the interior of Alaska. It is going to snow there as well. We're already seeing precipitation and wind moving up the southern parts of the Cook Inlet, and the main core of snow right now is really focused out on the west coast as this moves into the Seward Peninsula and the south-facing coastlines of the Norton Sound region and north of the Yukon Delta. For southeast conditions, not too bad. Fairly quiet weather right now. Small craft advisories have been out across the outer coast for the last few hours or so, but overall, very rough weather is not seen in southeast. We're looking at the main focus to be considerably further west than you, at least for another day or so. A 972 millibar low is what we find on the map this afternoon. Northerlies are working across the Bering Sea, the central and western chain, and across southerlies, bringing in southerlies for the eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula. And as that south and wet flow meets up with colder air across the Yukon Delta, that's where we're finding that good chance of snow and increasing that as we move further north through the rest of tonight. High pressure sitting across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and the eastern Brooks Range at 1,027 millibars, and a 1,035 millibar low sitting across the Yukon Delta and the Northwest Territories. All of that is working in tandem to bring in that deep southerly wind into parts of Prince William Sound and South Central, where we found rain and snow already today. Let's take a look at tonight. As we get into the overnight hours, we're still going to be dealing with wind across the Alaska Range. That should gradually subside as we head into early tomorrow morning. We have a boundary of low pressure sitting across western Alaska. That's focusing that moisture along it, producing periods of rain and snow, and some of which could be a little bit on the heavier side there. But you'll notice that warmer air is already sneaking in from the west, and as it does so, it's going to greatly reduce the amount of snow possible in southwestern Alaska. So that's why those winter weather advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta and the Valley are being allowed to expire. As you look northward, the focus for that cold air and that moisture is going to move over the Seward Peninsula into Kotzebue Sound and the Brooks Range, but the concern for heavier snowfall amounts right now are really focused up around the Seward Peninsula out towards St. Lawrence Island. And again, some places there on the Seward Peninsula could see as much as a total of 6 to 12 inches, and for St. Lawrence Island about 3 to 6 when it's all said and done. As we get into Wednesday, you'll notice some weather creeping in on southeastern Alaska, north of Sitka up toward Gustavus, maybe the capital city, Chilkoot and White Pass, and then northward up toward Yakutat. We're going to start to see clouds lower and rain gradually move in. The wind doesn't look to be much of an issue just yet, as high pressure positions out across the eastern Yukon and low pressure just outside of Prince William Sound at 1,013 millibars. So that pressure pattern isn't setting up just yet to provide a lot of wind to your area. For Wednesday, that low pressure boundary we were watching out west scoots east just a little bit more. That allows a little more warm air to move into parts of Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Everything for you looks to be primarily rainfall. For the Alaska Range, we're looking at snowfall, and that snow, especially the center of that highly productive area of snow, is going to be right over the Seward Peninsula with low pressure just to the south of Nome. At 999 millibars, that's a really good setup to be an efficient snow producer. And once again, St. Lawrence Island could be looking at 3 to 6 inches of snow in total, with areas around the interior of the Seward Peninsula under a winter storm watch at this point, looking at a total of 6 to 12 inches of snow. And again, parts of that would also include Nome. Areas of fog should linger just off the Arctic coast. Watch for snow over the Brooks Range. And low pressure sitting across the central Aleutians, that was fairly strong just 24 hours ago, is filling in. That'll be about 989 millibars by tomorrow night. That keeps the southerly flow over Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, but it keeps that colder, drier northerly flow coming into the central chain, and there's another weather disturbance coming in behind that. As we get into Thursday, you can see how that's combined now into a stronger area of low pressure again that's focusing more northerly winds through the Bering Strait and the Chukchi Sea and pulling in some of that colder air off of the northern interior. And that's, again, going to reinforce that really efficient snowmaker for St. Lawrence Island. The good news is heavy freezing spray is, while certainly present here across the Bering Strait, it's going to be an issue for mariners. The good news is that freezing spray is not expected to be much of an issue for St. Lawrence Island, so not a huge concern for us right now. But winds and snow and visibility certainly will be, and again, that's why you're under a winter storm warning. That will last into Thursday. Blowing snow will continue across the Brooks Range. We're likely to see snow showers across a large part of the Yukon and Kuskokwim lower valley areas and into the deltas. Showers will mix in with some snow, perhaps around the Bristol Bay region. A better chance a lot of this will be rain. And that deep southerly flow across the western Gulf also gets another shot of energy there at 977 millibars. This low will pump moisture into south central, parts of the Alaska Peninsula and into the Alaska Range. Southeast starts to get in on the precipitation. Northern areas will be looking at some rain and snow developing there, and winds will be increasing as we head through the rest of the week at this point. Low temperatures tonight back in the 20s and 30s for southeast, south central at or above freezing. It will be cool, but not as cold as it should be. Teens for the middle interior, including the Tanana Valley and Fairbanks. Single digits, some areas just below zero, like Utqiagvik and Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Nome 21, southwest, you're looking at temps in the lower to mid-30s, 43 in Kodiak, and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, with St. Paul looking at 38. High temperatures tomorrow in the north, really not seeing a big change there. Single digits, some areas just touching the 10-degree mark. 28 around Galena, southwest into the mid to upper 30s. That even includes McGrath, really not all that cold, sitting at 30 degrees. South central, upper 30s for you, 45 in Kodiak. Southeast looking at 30s as well.
And now,
aviation weather around Alaska. And moving on to aviation weather now, IFR conditions are expected across northern parts of southeast, hit and miss around Prince William Sound in the morning, northern and western parts of the Alaska Range. And as you get north of the Yukon Valley up toward the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, up toward the upper end of the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, all the way out toward Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and the western sections of the Yukon Delta, look for IFR. MVFR conditions fairly widespread across the Bering and certainly western Alaska, the North Slope. IFR is going to increase north of the Brooks Range summits as we get through your Wednesday afternoon and really develop and thicken up across most of Norton Sound, along the lower and middle Yukon Valley, and then also across interior parts of southwestern Alaska, generally north of Lake Iliamna. As you get into Kodiak Island and eastwards, widespread MVFR into Prince William Sound and really most of the Kenai Peninsula. Northern parts of Cook Inlet will probably still be VFR into a large section of the Copper River Valley there and through Tenita Pass. Central and southern parts of southeast looking like VFR tomorrow, but Chilkoot and White Pass will hold around IFR. Look for IFR conditions across AKwx and Adigan Pass for your Thursday morning, and that continues all the way down into Norton Pass, the Yukon Delta, as well as parts of southwestern Alaska, northern southeast, and hit and miss around Prince William Sound, but widespread MVFR for really just about everywhere not in eastern sections of the interior or the Copper River Valley. You'll notice again northern parts of Cook Inlet also looking to be VFR tomorrow morning. Some of that will fill in around the Cook Inlet region all the way up the Parks Highway, but it looks like generally areas north of the Alaska Range and just to the west around McGrath will probably see at least a chance at VFR, with many other areas including the North Slope, the West Coast, and northern parts of the Gulf still looking at IFR for your Thursday afternoon. Here's your pass conditions in for Wednesday. We see a transition happening around AKwx and Adigan Pass tomorrow, moving over toward IFR conditions as the day goes on. IFR is expected at the end of the day for Adigan Pass too. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to hold at IFR really all day long for your Wednesday. Rainy Pass, maybe a shift over toward marginal conditions as the day goes on. Windy Pass likely holding at IFR in the morning, and then maybe some improvement gradually throughout the day, and we expect similar conditions for Isabel Pass too. Mentasta Pass looks pretty good at this point. Visual flight rule is expected through your Wednesday. Tenita Pass, again, it'll be the diamond in the rough there, it looks like. Tenita Pass at VFR. IFR conditions for Portage Pass, some improvement may be seen in the afternoon. We'll do it all over again on Thursday. And Chilkoot and White Pass we expect to hold at IFR levels there throughout your day. Freezing levels show that there is some warm air, but it's generally to the south and east side of the Gulf, with the surface freezing line very close to the similar position there, right across southwestern sections of Alaska, and then jogging northward towards St. Matthew. You can see levels there around 2 to about 4,000 feet. It looks like icing potential of anywhere from 2 to about 6,000 feet. The lowest levels, of course, up in the north and across St. Lawrence Island. The central and eastern sections of the Gulf running between about 4 and 6 levels, holding around isolated moderate right now. Pretty pronounced trough of low pressure sits right across the west coast of Alaska. A little bit of a ridge trying to build in here, but the main corridor of fast-moving air is coming across the North Pacific between about 120 and 130 knots, and that is creating a strong southerly flow working its way into western Alaska between 55 and 60 knots, but it has a strong surge at the base of this that's keeping it moving at about 125 knots, so a ridge over eastern parts of Alaska. You can see that ridge here at the lower levels, 9,000 feet, southerly winds being driven across the Gulf, light winds moving ashore into southeastern Alaska. You can see winds up across northwest, anywhere from about 15 to 40 knots, and a little bit of a west and southwesterly flow reaching the North Slope. Low pressure sitting south of Nikolsky with a southerly flow over Bristol Bay and the eastern chain in the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit of a ridge here trying to form in. We saw that with the jet stream level. And westerlies coming across the North Pacific, keeping low pressure gradually creeping eastward there. Wind speeds out across the chain around 30 to about 50 knots. At 3,000 feet, here's our ridge once again. Southerlies are fairly light for most of southeast. They're a little bit stronger as you move out over the Barren Islands and the Kenai Peninsula, showing 40 knots there. A south and westerly flow over interior Alaska, and then here's our trough stretching northbound all the way up toward the Bering Strait and bringing those northerly winds all the way across the central and western chain. So wind speeds on the interior anywhere from 15 to about 25 or so for most parts of the interior here at 3,000 feet. Turbulence, we're going to watch some stronger areas of wind and shear here just west and along the Alaska Range from the Barrens northward toward about Calkin Island. anywhere from about 4,000 to 10,000 feet in this range. It should really taper off quickly as you move northward toward the Yukon Valley, but along the Alaska Range below 6,000 feet, considerable moderate is possible for a good chunk of tomorrow, and along the Alaska Peninsula and Central Chain. We'll have a look at the rest of your weather here in just a few minutes. Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool. And
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at Dehne, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that and to see how it reacts in time, and
right.
It's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for topography can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work, the GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu. EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And on to your marine weather now. As we look up north, a healthy amount of sea ice is covering up the Beaufort Seacoast. No big changes there, but we're starting to see some of the areas along the Chukchi Coast really fill in. There's still some marginal areas of marginal ice north and east of Wainwright. And then you see what is filling in here across the Chukchi Sea. Northwesterly winds are blowing a lot of this pack down the Russian seacoast, and we expect this to fill in a little bit more over the coming days. The other thing to note is sea surface temperatures are dropping pretty quickly there in the northwest. You'll notice Norton Sound's filled in fairly nicely, and across the YK coastline, ice is moving southward and freezing up more. No ice in Cook Inlet just yet, though. For the very latest, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and check out the analysis for yourself. Make sure you check out the latest outlook as well. Here's a look at southeast. Winds will be fairly light on the inside passage as we go through Wednesday. Look for northerlies in the Lynn Canal with 2-foot seas there. Across the outer coast, seas and winds coming up. Southerlies there with 14-foot seas extending well north up toward Prince William Sound. A south and southeasterly flow, 15 to 30 knots is expected for your Wednesday. And as we get into Thursday, a steady southeasterly flow at 25 knots, seas holding around 12 feet on the outer coast, and winds coming up across the inside passage anywhere from about 10 to 15 knots and 3 to 4-foot seas on the inside. As we get into Prince William Sound, look for easterlies, 20 knots, 4-foot seas there. A south and easterly flow coming into north and western parts of the Gulf and through the Barren Islands up to 30 knots there with a 9 to 10-foot sea. Northeasterlies light in the northern Cook Inlet region and 30 knots with a 5-foot sea across southern Cook Inlet for Wednesday. For Thursday, north and easterly winds coming down Cook Inlet, 20 to 30, coming up to 6 to 8-foot seas as well. Easterlies for the Barren Islands, a 10-foot sea expected there on 30-knot winds, and east and northeasterly winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound and Hitchinbrook entrance, looking for 3-foot seas on the inside for your Thursday. For Bristol Bay, southeasterly winds, a 4-foot sea there, 7-foot seas down the coast, and south and southeasterly winds coming over Kodiak Island, 20 to 30-knot winds, expecting 19 to 20-foot seas on Wednesday, and diminishing to about 10 to 13-foot seas there on Thursday. Northeasterlies remain strong inside of Shelikof Strait with a 30-knot wind, and lighter winds expected for Prince William Sound and down the Alaska Peninsula coastline, 2 to 4-foot seas on Thursday. North and westerly winds for the central and western chain, looking for northeasterlies west of Kiska, northwesterlies as you get to Adak and Atka, about 30 to 35-knot winds. 21-foot seas there on the back side of that weather maker that's working its way through the central and eastern chain. You can see the circulation right here. A steady southerly flow at 25 knots with a 19-foot sea there south of Unalaska and Nikolsky. By Thursday, winds are diminishing in the east, but picking up again in the west as that next weather system starts to move through. 30 to 35 knot winds there with 15 to 19-foot seas expected as winds again continue to diminish for the central chain. Looking at the west coast, a southeasterly flow coming up across Macoriuk and Nunivak Island, 15 to 20 knots. Looking for an east and northerly wind coming out of Norton Sound and south of St. Lawrence Island, 35 knots with a 12-foot sea. Northeasterlies for St. Matthew at 19-foot seas there and 15 knot winds for St. Paul and St. George with a 10-foot sea expected for Wednesday. Northerlies will take over for most areas as we get into Thursday. Again, this is all following that low pressure system organizing in the Gulf. Easterlies outside of the Kuskokwim Delta. Ice has been forming there. 5-foot seas, though, over the open waters and 12-foot seas around St. Lawrence Island. As you look up north, light winds and westerlies for the Beaufort Seacoast. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi Coast, 15 to 30, with 3 to as high as 7-foot seas expected. Northerlies through the Bering Strait at 35 knots. As we check on Thursday, northeasterly winds will be strengthening. You can see 12-foot seas coming up outside of Kotzebue Sound and north of Shishmaref. Look for a northerly wind continuing through the Bering Strait with a 12-foot sea. Northeasterlies up the Chukchi Coast, 15 to 35. Seas as high as 9 to 12-foot seas in those regions. And northerlies coming over the ice and right into the Beaufort Seacoast at about 15 knots for your Thursday. Now on to tonight's weather. Low pressure will sit across the northern Gulf at 1,018 millibar low there, still giving us a little bit of a southerly flow and keeping periods of rain and snow across the northern Gulf Coast. The real focus for more intense weather and snowfall for that matter will continue across the west, Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula, and areas around St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, where winter weather advisories are posted and winter storm warnings are posted. For St. Lawrence Island especially, there are 3 to 6 inches of snow and gusts to 65 miles per hour may continue well into Thursday. For areas across the Seward Peninsula, you may see as much as 6 to 12 inches of snow by the time each wave of these snow events has passed through your region. Thursday may be one of the more intense days with low pressure just outside of Nome at 992 millibars. In the meantime, wind will subside across the eastern Alaska Range, but snow and blowing snow may become more of an issue for the western parts of the Brooks Range and northern sections of the Koyukuk Valley.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.